Hello everyone, welcome to SFDC Facts Academy. This is going to be my another crash course, and this time we'll be talking about Apex Triggers. In this video, I'll be breaking down everything about Apex Trigger, and it will start with what is an Apex Trigger, when you should write one, where you should write one. And I'm not only going to teach you how you should be writing your Apex Trigger, I'll also be talking about some of the best practices that you should keep in mind while you should be writing your trigger, because the goal is not to just teach you writing the trigger. The goal is to teach you how you should write the most optimized, the most scalable and maintainable Apex Trigger. So we'll be talking about everything about it. Like my any other crash courses, this video will also be covering a lot of real world problem statements, and I'll be talking about like how you should break down those problem statements to smaller chunks, how you should perceive that problem statement, and then you can convert it to a fully functional code. Now, those of you who know me already, they know that I don't create videos just for the views. So let me set the right context about the target audience of this video, so I do not waste your time teaching you something that you already know or teaching you something that you might not understand at this moment. So if you are a beginner Salesforce developer, I expect you to at least have some knowledge of Apex programming language before you start watching this video, because I'll not be covering the basic stuff on Apex, like your loops, conditional statements, variables, operators and all that. So I expect you to have that knowledge before you watch this video. On the other hand, if you are an experienced Salesforce developer who has been writing some Apex code and has written some Apex triggers before, I would recommend that you only watch the problem statement number 2, which I'll be covering at the end of this video. And the reason is, this is going to be a complex problem statement which will be covering a lot of complex scenarios like trigger recursion, handling all sorts of trigger events, and writing the most optimized code. And some of these scenarios you might have not seen in the code that you have written so far. So I would recommend that you watch problem statement 2. And if you are looking for a Salesforce developer job, then I highly recommend that you still watch the problem statement number 2 of this video, which is a very complex problem, and it will help you gain that knowledge that you need to clear that job interview. Now, if you are a Salesforce admin, please do watch this video, because this will help you build some knowledge on the Apex triggers and also help you translate your Salesforce flows and process builder knowledge to a coding solution with Apex triggers. And this might help you to convert from your Salesforce admin job role to Salesforce developer job role. Now, one more thing, I'm creating this video after a very long break. I think it's been 3 years since I've created my last crash course. And as you know me, I put a lot of hard work behind these videos before I put a crash course video on my YouTube channel. So I would request you, if you like this video and if you learn something valuable, please do give it a thumbs up and do share this video with your network who wants to learn Salesforce in the quickest possible way. And please do comment on this video with a topic that you want me to cover next. This will motivate me to create more such videos for you. Now let's get right into it. Okay, so without any further delay, let's start this crash course by learning what is an Apex trigger. In a nutshell, an Apex trigger allows you to automate your business processes. If you come from the database background, you will understand the Apex triggers as database triggers, where you can execute some stored procedures based on some of the DML events happening in your database. If you come from Salesforce admin background, you can think of Apex triggers as record triggered flows, where you can execute certain actions or tasks before and after a change happen in a Salesforce record. This change can be update or creation of the record or anything else like delete or undelete of the record. If you come from the Java background and if you have been using Hibernate events, then you can think of Apex triggers as Hibernate event listeners, where you would have these database event listeners in Hibernate to execute certain actions whenever there is a data manipulation happening in your database entities. So the core of everything that I explained so far is that Apex triggers allow you to get rid of some of the repetitive and manual actions or tasks that are being performed or executed by a normal human being, and give those tasks to your system so that these tasks can be automatically executed when needed. An example would be, let's say I have a video course published on a website, and this website takes so many other courses into the same category, but they need to know or they need to define the bestseller course in a particular category. How do they do it? They look at the number of ratings, the average rating, and the number of reviews on that particular course. Now this task can very easily be done by a human being by going through all those countless courses and checking the ratings and reviews. But should it be done by the human being? It should not be, because we already know the checks we are performing and the actions that we want to execute after those checks are satisfied. So an Apex trigger here would be going through all the courses in a particular category. It would see that, hey, this particular course has the minimum average rating that we want and the minimum amount of reviews and rating. So let's mark this one as bestseller. Now with this simple automation, you have saved X amount of manual hours, and now you can distribute your resources to do some complex tasks that you cannot automate. Now let's take a look at a basic Apex trigger, or how the skeleton code of an Apex trigger looks like. So whenever you define an Apex trigger, it always starts with the keyword trigger. After that, your trigger name, which in my case is my test trigger. Then you have this keyword on, which you do not have to be worried about, as you always write it as is. And then after that, this is where your SObject would go. Now the reason I'm saying it as an SObject, because it could be a standard object or it can be a custom object as well. So let's say you have a custom object called video course. So you will be actually doing it as video underscore course _c. That would be the API name of your custom object, I'm assuming, but you get the point. After that, you start your parentheses, and inside these parentheses, you will have your trigger events, which means on what events this particular code or this trigger would be invoked. Now here as an example, I have before insert and after update, but you can have as many events defined here as needed. Now after these code blocks, you will write your trigger code here where you will do your business automation, and there is no limitation on how many writes you can write here, because that's the whole purpose of Apex triggers. It can get as complex as it need to be, or it can be something very easy as well. Since we now know how a basic Apex trigger skeleton code looks like, let's also talk about what are the different types of Apex triggers. So in general, if you want to categorize, there can be only two types of Apex triggers. One would be before trigger and the other one would be the after trigger. The before trigger executes before a certain DML operation happens. For example, before insertion of record, or before updation of a record, or before deletion of a record. And the after triggers are fired after that action has taken place. Like after a record is inserted, or after the record is updated, or after the record is deleted. So in total, we have 7 Apex trigger event types, and those are very self-explanatory. Those are before insert, after insert, before update and after update, before delete and after delete, and after undelete. Now you may ask, like, why we do not have before undelete? The reason being, when a record is deleted, then there's nothing to be worked upon, right? So when you undelete a record, that means you bring a record back from the recycle bin to your main Salesforce storage. At that moment, there's nothing to be worked upon, because that particular record is still in recycle bin. So there is no such event called before undelete. You can only do certain actions once that record is brought back to your main storage in your Salesforce object, and that's why we only have after undelete trigger. Now these events are something that I was talking about here in the trigger skeleton code. This is where you would define these events. So you can have all these 7 events defined inside these parentheses, which means this particular trigger would be executed for all of these events. So this is how this trigger code would look like now. Okay, so enough talking, and now it's time to write some code. So let's get into the action. So now I'm inside my Salesforce org, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open my developer console here. Now, only just for this section of the crash course, I'm going to use the developer console to give you a basic idea that you don't need any local setup to follow this crash course along. You can use the developer console to follow everything that I'll be doing in the crash course. But what I'll be personally doing is I'll be moving to VS Code to write all my code, and I'll be explaining you guys through the VS Code. I'm going to link my other videos on YouTube which explains how you can set up the VS Code and how you can connect with your Salesforce developer org, but I won't be doing that in this video, so just check that link somewhere in the description. So now I'm in my Salesforce developer console, and let me zoom my screen a bit. And the example I was showing moments before was a trigger on the lead object. So let's do that here as well. So I'm going to go in the file, and here you should have an option to create an Apex trigger. It should also give you a link to pick your SObject. In our case, we should be picking lead, and let's call it my test trigger. Let's click on submit, and this developer console should automatically write that skeleton code for you. But if you notice, we only have the before insert event here. So let's go back to the VS Code that we had before, and I'm going to copy everything from here. Let's copy this entire thing actually and paste here. Let's save our code. Okay, perfect. Now we have a basic Apex trigger in our Salesforce org. How do you check it? Like, how do you know that it is saved and it's active? So you go back to your Salesforce org, and here I think you should have an option for triggers. There you go. And this should allow us to see all our triggers that we define. So if we click here, I think it should also show the basic Apex trigger code that we were seeing in the developer console. But we know that it is on the lead object and it is active. So that's what we wanted to see. Let me zoom this screen as well. Now let's write some basic code here. So let's simply write a debug statement here that says lead trigger invoked. And I should change it to the single quotation mark, and let's save this. Now, how would this trigger be invoked? As I said, these triggers are automatically invoked when any of these events happen on this particular SObject. So what we should be doing is, let me go to my lead object. It will take some time. And let's create a new lead record. I'm going to type my name here. It would need the company name as well, so let's type that too. And I think that should be it. Now let's save this record. And if you have your developer console open on the side, you should be seeing these logs showing up. Now it's hard to see which of these log records that we want to see, because all of these are being generated for various events, including your UI events. So what I generally do is I pick the biggest size log, and in most cases that's the log file that we want to see. And as you see in this case also, this is the correct log file because this has the logs for our trigger execution. And now we only want to see the debug statements that we have added here. So what I'll do is I'll click on this debug only checkbox, and it should only show me the debug logs that we have added. Now you would see that we have two different log statements here, and both are duplicate. But what we did is we did it only once, right? That's because this particular trigger is being executed for all of these events. And now as you see, like, we only created the record, so it should only be executing the insert events, right? But we have both before insert and the after insert event here. So that is why this particular log line or anything that you would write inside this trigger would be executed twice. Okay, so now we have a problem. Our trigger code is being invoked for all these events, but let's say we only want to invoke it for the insert event or only for certain type of events. So how do we control that? One way of doing that would be to get rid of all the other events, let's say all of these, and let's say we only want to invoke it during the before insert, and let's add or modify our log line here that lead trigger invoked before insert. And let's say we also want to invoke this event for after insert. So either you can add that event here, but then again whatever you will be writing here, let me actually copy this log line, paste it here, and what I'm gonna do is I want to invoke something after insert. So if I do this and if I copy the after insert from here and would save it, then what do you think would happen? So what I want to do is I want to execute this line before the record is inserted, and I want to invoke this next line after the record is inserted. So how do we control that? Do you think this is how it will work? I don't think so, because we have both the events, so we will see both of these lines being duplicated. Let's quickly check it. Actually, I'm going to change it to update so that I don't have to keep creating new lead records and I can just update the existing ones. So let's go back to our lead records. Let's pick this guy and let's edit this record. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to change the company name from SFDC Effects to SFDC Effects Academy, and let's save it. And if you have your developer console open, you should have the log showing up here. And how do we pick our log this time? Because I do not see something which is, oh yeah, this one, 6.1 KB. And this one has our before update trigger. So if I click on debug only, you see we are seeing both of these lines repeating twice. So it did not work how we want it to, because both of these lines are being executed for all the events. So how do we sort out this problem? So the first way of doing it is like you come here, you create another Apex trigger. Remember, there is no limit on how many Apex triggers you can write on a particular SObject, but we'll talk about this later on when we'll be talking about the best practice. Just keep following the course with me. So here I'm going to create another test trigger. Let's call it my test trigger 2. Let's submit it. I'm going to copy everything from here and paste everything here. Just make sure that you do not update the trigger name. It should be my test trigger 2. But here in this trigger, I'm going to get rid of before update and this before update log line as well, because I'm only going to keep this trigger for after update. And in this one, I'm going to remove the after update event and the log line. So let's save this and let's go back to our lead record, edit the company name again, click on save, and let's go back to our developer console. So this is the log file which is the biggest one. So I'm going to open this one. Let's close the earlier one and let's quickly go to debug only. So you see we have 2 before update and 1 after update. Now why did this happen? We should have ideally seen 1 before update and 1 after update. So how we can verify why the before update trigger actually executed twice? We can go here and see it, like we can examine the entire log file. So going through this log file can help us understand why the before update trigger log line executed twice, or the before update trigger executed twice. So we see the before update trigger executed, which should be how it is, and we should be seeing our log line here, that before update trigger invoked. Then we see our after trigger unit started, and this one is also showing before update log line. Let's keep following, and then we see our after update trigger again, and then we see the after update log line. Now this can happen because of certain other actions happening on this record. For example, this duplicate detector logic might be executing these triggers again, but let's actually see it in the analysis mode. Okay, so if you switch to analysis mode, what you would see here, the triggers are invoked, and then there's a workflow on lead, the lead assignment workflow that executed, which might have invoked this after update trigger again, and maybe that is why we are seeing two different log lines. So this would have been like easy to understand if it would be a custom object where none of these standard workflows or anything would be happening, and ideally we would have seen only two log lines here, one before update and the one is after update. So we have seen like one way of handling this, handling before update and the after update, but this is not the most ideal way, because the best practice says that you should only have one Apex trigger per SObject, but here what we have is two Apex triggers for lead object. And why the best practice says that we should only have one? Because even though Salesforce allows you to create multiple Apex triggers on a Salesforce object, it cannot control the execution or like the execution sequence of these Apex triggers. So sometimes you might see my test trigger is being executed first, and after that my test trigger 2, or sometimes what you would see is that my test trigger 2 would be invoked first and then my test trigger 1 would be invoked. So since we cannot control the order of execution here, it's always risky to implement your business cases or your automation in this way. What you want is more granular control on what to execute and exactly when. So what to do here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this trigger now. Hopefully it allows me to delete. And now we should only have one Apex trigger, and let's actually add our after update event as well. And to actually solve this issue, Salesforce gives us the trigger context variable. So I'm also going to keep showing you this developer guide that you can follow. I'll also link it in the description so that you know from where you can learn more about Apex triggers or Apex in general. I always follow this developer guide. It's free to use and it has lot of examples and lot of explanation about everything along with best practices. So it's highly recommended that you follow along and you also refer to this developer guide whenever needed. So let's go to the trigger context variable here, and you would see we get a lot of context variables. So I'm not going to talk about each and every one of these inside this course, or maybe I will, but let's see. Let's start with this isInsert trigger context variable. What it tells you is, let me zoom this screen a bit. It returns true if this trigger was fired due to an insert operation. We have isUpdate as well, isDelete as well, isUndelete as well, and we have isBefore and isAfter as well. If you use the isBefore trigger context variable, then it will return true if this trigger was fired before any record was saved, and isAfter will be true if this event is fired after the record is saved. We'll also talk about this new map, old and old map when we get into some more complex examples. But to solve our problem right now, I think what we need is this before, after and update trigger context variable. So let's go back to developer console, and here what I want to do is I want to check Trigger.isUpdate. Now what this would mean is that if it's an update event that's invoking this trigger, then this following line will be executed. But what I want is more granular control, that we only want it to be executed before the update event. So I'm going to have another if condition here that should say Trigger.isBefore, and that's when I'll be invoking this. And let's copy this, and I'm going to say isAfter. Let's format our code in a nice way. and change our debug lines. Let's save our code. It should save without any issues. By the way, if you have any issues in your code, you can always come to this problems tab, which should show you any syntax error in your code. For example, let's actually make a syntax issue. And I'm now trying to save this code, and you would see it's complaining about that this particular thing, it does not know about it, what it is. So let's fix it. Now I'm going to go back to my lead record, and again let's update the company name and click on save. We should have our logs showing up. Click on this log and click on debug only, and now we see that this we only see one line each, where the before update is fired once and after update is fired once. So we are actually solving the same problem, but now with this one single Apex trigger. Maybe we had two different Apex triggers and some other automation was happening, so that's why we were seeing this log line twice. But as I said, if you would do this on a custom object that does not have any other automation running on top of it, you will always see the results that you want. So this is what we wanted. We wanted to have more granular control on our code, and we were able to achieve it with the help of this trigger context variable. Okay, so is this the only way to write this code, where you will be accessing these multiple if-else condition with this different trigger context variable, and that's when you'll start writing your code? No, we can actually make it better. So let's go back to our Apex developer guide, and if you'll see more trigger context variable, and if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you will see something called operation type. And what it does is it returns an enum of type system.trigger.operation corresponding to current operation, which means we can actually have a switch and when statement on Trigger.operation, and then we can listen for or have our conditions on these different events. Now again, I'm not going to explain what a switch when statement is, because this course is only about Apex triggers, so I'm just assuming that you would know it. And now let's start a switch statement here, and what we will be switching upon is trigger operation. Let's say when before update. That was the enum value that we were expecting, and here let's bring this particular log line. We can also have another when, and that says after update. Again, I'm not making these things up because these are already predefined enum values that we see here as well. I'm just following it all along. So let's copy this log line now and paste it here, and that's what we should be having. Okay, it's complaining about trigger operation, so I think what we need to do is, like, this is our context variable, not this. That's the type of the context variable. So let's switch it to Trigger.operationType, and I hope it allows us to save the code now. It does. So now our trigger code is saved, and if you can see, we are using instead of 3 different context variables, we are just using one single context variable, and then we are just simply using the enum values from it. So this just makes our code a bit cleaner. But now let's see whether it works or not. So I'm going to again update the company name, go back here, go under logs. This is the new log line or log file. Go to debug only, and we see the exact same result. So this is how I would be structuring our trigger code from going forward. Rather than using all these different context variables, we will always be using the operation type, and then we will be handling the enum values inside a switch and when statement. So enough with the debug statements, and now let's write some real code here. Now let's say whenever I want to save a lead record, I want to append limited or INC after the company name. So let's see, if I put SFDC facts here, then I want it to be automatically converted to SFDC facts incorporation, like SFDC facts INC. How can we achieve it? Like, either I would come here and check every single lead record, come here and update it myself. We should be doing it in a manual way, but we want to automate it, right? And this is a very basic example of automating things. So let's go back to our developer console, and we already have our Apex trigger written here. So instead of like having just the log line here, we want to update the current record. And how can we do that? How can we get the current lead record? So let's say we have our lead record, say lead, right? And what we want is on this lead record, we want to update the company name, and this should be like this: lead record.company should be equals to the current value, which can be this itself. And what we want to do is we want to append INC at the end of it. This can be in short written as plus equals to INC, like this. So that would be the short way of writing the exact same code. Now as you see, we don't have any issue with the code and it's saved fine, but do you think it will work? It will not. I will show you why it won't work. Let's actually update one of the record. I'm going to remove INC from the end of it, click save, and now you see it's not even allowing us to save because there is a null pointer exception in our code. And that is because this lead record, we don't know what this lead record is. It's null. We just declared it. We haven't got the value of it from somewhere. How do we get the value of this lead record? And because this is a trigger, we already know on which particular record this trigger is executing. So we should be able to get this lead record, right? So let's go back to our Apex developer guide and let's see some more context variable. So we have a context variable called new, which returns the list of new versions of SObject records, which is what we want. But what it will do is it's going to return the list of records. I'll talk about this list and everything later, that why we always get a list and not the exact same record when we'll get to the best practices. But for now, let's say we have a lead record, and how can we get it? The way we have been using our context variable. So we'll use this trigger class because that's where these context variables are defined, and we are going to use new. Now what it gives me is the list of new versions of the records. So if I want to add a comment here, this is going to give me a list of lead. That's what this is going to give me. But what I want is just this one, just one record. And that's what it is complaining about as well, that we are trying to assign a list like this guy to just this guy, like from list to just one record. We can't do that. How can we do it is we can just maybe like get the first record from this list. That would work for our use case, right? And now it should not complain anymore. Other way of doing it is, I think we can also use the get function that's available on the list, and we want to get the 0th index from that list. Let's see if that works or not. It does. So either ways, we can just get the first record of the list, and now we have our lead record. We can update it, and that should be it. So if I go back to my lead record again, you would see that I have removed INC from the end of it. Click save. It should save now, and we should have INC again. To show you that it actually works, let's change it to SFDC Facts Academy, and if I save it now, it's converted to SFDC Facts Academy INC, and that's all because of this line of code. Now let me actually change this code a bit. What I want is I want a list of lead. So, and let's call them leads here. What I want to do is just get the 0th lead from it. So then I can go into lead record, leads 0. Now why am I doing it? Just to make this code more readable for new Salesforce developers. We are doing the exact same task. It's just like instead of writing one single line, we have broken it down to 2 lines, so that you know that this actually gives me the list of leads, and from there we can pick one. Now what happens if we move this code from here to here? Like instead of updating the lead record in before update event, what if we update the lead record in after update event? Let's save this. Hopefully it gets saved. And now if I come back here, I'm going to remove all of this and I'm going to save it. Now what we see here, we see an error that says that we are trying to update a record in after update event where this record is in read-only mode. Now what this error is trying to explain to us, as I said, these before update events execute before a record is saved in database, and the after update events are executed when that record is already saved in the database. So you are free to update a record before it gets saved in DB. That's why it was allowing us to do this manipulation, do this automation in before update event. But since this record is now already saved in DB, this particular lead record, in the after update, when we are trying to update it, it's not allowing us because this is already saved. Now you can't change it. You can only change it in the before update event. So where I'm going with this is I want to explain you the difference of a before update event and the after update event, and this could be the first example. So let me move it back to the before update event again. The next question comes is, if we have to automate everything in the before update, then why do you even have the after update or after insert or after delete? Why do we have those sort of events? So to understand that, we need to know when to use before update and when to use after update, because before also cannot be used in all sort of scenarios. Both of these are designed for a specific use case. And the way how I read it is, if you are updating the self record on which this trigger is being executed, here the record would be this guy, Manish Chaudhary. Like we want to update this record itself because we are updating the company name, right? So if you are updating the self record, then it's always ideal to go into before update. It's not even ideal. I think the system would throw you an error if you try to do it in after update, as we have already seen an error. So if you are updating the self record, always use before update. But if you are updating some other record that's related to it, or you are doing any sort of other automation, then you can opt for after update. So let's understand this with an example. So let's go back to our lead record, and let's say whenever we want to update the rating on this lead record to, let's say, hot, we want to create a task for our sales team that we have a hot lead record coming up and we should follow up. So the task is another object, right? We are not trying to update the same lead record. What we want to do is we want to read the values from this lead record, and based on that we want to create another object's record. In this case, that would be an activity, a task. So let's see how we can do that. So we come to our after update, we get our lead record in the same way. I'm going to copy these 2 lines. So we have our lead record, and here what I want to do is I want to check the rating of this lead record, and if it's equals to hot, then what I want to do is I want to create a new task. So let's do task, and that should be it. We should also be setting some values to this task. like follow-up dot what ID, which is a field on the task object, and the ID could be this lead records ID. And we should also be setting up the subject, I think that's what it's called, follow up on a new hot lead. Let's also set the priority of this task. We have a priority field and let's call it high. And now do you think we'll have a new task created? Let's see. Let's come back here and let's change the rating to hot and save it. Do we have a new activity here? We don't. And I know the reason. Hopefully you know the reason as well. If not, try to pause this video here and try to identify the error or the issue with our current code. Okay, so the reason we don't see our task here is because we haven't even inserted this task. We just created it, right? So we need to insert it. Let's take our task record, use our insert statement. Again, not going to explain these in this video because this should be part of your basic Apex knowledge. So you know what I'm doing here. I'm just inserting a new task record. But you might be asking a question that, hey, when we were updating this lead record with this, whatever the automation we were doing, we did not have update statement here like this. Why we don't have that? Because this trigger itself is being invoked during an updation process, right? We were updating this lead record from the UI and that's when this trigger is invoked. So we don't have to update it again by ourselves because the trigger is actually running on that particular record. But here the trigger is not running on this task record. It's still running on the lead record and we are trying to create a task record as one of the automation process, right? So that is why we need to have the insert statement here. So now if I come back here, let's remove all of this. And actually now let's update it to cold. So we should not be seeing any task again because our condition says the rating should be hot, right? So what I'm gonna do is let's remove this guy. Let's change the rating to hot again and click on save. Ooh, there is an error. It says insert failed. Field integrity exception related. The ID of incorrect type. Okay, so seems like we cannot use what ID field with the lead record ID value, I guess. So maybe change it to who ID. This might work. I don't know though. Let's try to save it again. It works. So now if I come back here at in the activity tab, you should see that follow up on a new hot lead and you see the priority of this task is high. So that's how you can use your after update trigger to do these sort of actions. Now you can very well move this code to the before update event as well and it should work fine. But the best practice would be that you would be doing it in the after update because we want to make sure that our lead record is updated and saved in the DB before we do the tasks that comes after it. So once this lead record is saved in the DB, that's when we want to create the task. We don't want to create it beforehand and when our lead record is not even saved. And if you see, we are using the lead record ID. So what if I'm using the after insert or before insert? So in the before insert, you might not even have this ID. Let me show you the quick example actually. First, I'm going to move this code from here to before update and show you that it will work as is. So if I come here, update this, keep it hot, save it, I should still be seeing another task. As you see now, there are two different tasks. But what I want to do now, I want to change it to before insert. I don't want to call this code during the update. I want to call it during the insert, and now you will know the issue. So you won't see any issue while saving your code. It should work, but when I come back and try to create a new lead record, now it should not go through and it should give me an error. And then not this, let's update the rating to hot and click save. Oh, why it did not complain about this? It did not create the lead record for us, that the task record for us that we know for sure. But I'm wondering why it did not complain about this guy. Did we not set the rating to hot? We did. Oh, because this lead record ID would be null. So the who ID would be null, and in that case it works. That's why. So the task is created, but it's not associated with this lead record, which is what we want. And I'll show you that task. We should be able to find that task. Let's open it in a new tab. And we should be able to find our task. This should be our task, and you see it's not related to anything. But if you go in our other task, you would see it was related to the lead record. So that's the issue that I wanted to show you, that why you should keep this logic in after update or after triggers, not in the before triggers. So again, I'm going to copy this code. We'll keep my trigger as is, and I'll move it to after insert. And you will see, if this time we'll create a new lead record, we should be able to see the task correctly being associated. Let's change the rating to hot and let's save it. So our lead record is created, but we also see our task created and associated with that lead record. So that's why it's always ideal to create the other related records, create, update, or whatever you want to do on those other related records in the after. But if you are updating the self record, then you should always go for the before insert, because you want that updation to happen before that record is persisted in the DB. Okay, so before moving to some more complex examples and some more complex topics around Apex triggers, let's also see one more thing, how you can throw errors from Apex triggers. So let's say you want to validate a record and you want to prevent the current operation on that record. How can you do that? So to give you an example, let's say we don't want any of our lead record to be created or updated without the lead source field being populated. So if lead source is blank, we want this creation or updation to fail. Now you would say that you can very easily do it through validation rules. Yes, you can, but as I said, my purpose here is to explain you Apex triggers and how you can do things using Apex trigger. So we'll just try to understand throwing error or throwing exceptions from Apex trigger with this simple basic example. But you can have like very complex scenarios where you want to throw errors based on your business case or use case. So we'll keep our current trigger as is. I can actually update it to update so that I don't have to create new lead records. Or actually let's do one more thing. Let's actually make it for before insert, after insert as well. Now this particular trigger will be called for all these events, but we are not handling before update and after update here, right? So anything in the before update and after update will be ignored by this switch statement and nothing will be executed. So this gives me a liberty to actually also explain you how you can combine multiple enum values inside when I think it should be as easy as doing this. So this following code should be called for both before insert and before update now, if I remember the syntax correctly. I'm trying to save it and we'll see like if there are any problems with the code. There are none, so that means it will work. So I'm going to add after update as well here, and now the same code would work for insert and update and everything. Let me add a condition here. If lead record dot source, I think it's called lead source, yeah. If it's equals to null, that means it's not filled, then we want to throw an error. How can we do that? We can do that with the help of add error method, and you can define your custom message here. Lead source is mandatory. Should be good. And that's how you throw error from a trigger. Let's quickly try to update this lead record again. I'm not selecting anything in the lead source, and we should see our error now. You see, lead source is mandatory and it's coming from our Apex trigger. Of course, you can do it through validation rule as well. I hear you. So that should be it. Actually, let's populate a lead source and I'll show you that it won't complain. Then it will allow us to save the record. If you try to blank it out again, it will give us the error again. Okay, so that's pretty much that I wanted to show you with this basic example. I wanted to explain you some basic stuff around Apex triggers. Now we'll move to a more complex example where we will learn more complex topics around Apex triggers and more best practices. And I'll also move to the VS Code now, instead of writing all my code here inside the developer console. But as I said, you can follow me along through the developer console as well if you don't know how to set up the VS Code. So now let's move to our next problem statement. I'm gonna quickly paste it here in the VS Code. So our problem statement says, when an opportunity is marked as closed won, create follow-up tasks for the sales team to engage with the customer, schedule a welcome call, and send a thank you email. Also update the next steps on the opportunity to onboard a contract. Okay, so let's break down this problem into multiple chunks. First is, we need to identify what we are trying to do. It's a sort of automation that we want to do, but where we want to do it. Like, we see opportunity being mentioned here, we see task being mentioned here. So on which object should we implement our automation? Should it be the opportunity or should it be the task object? Now to answer this question, we should always look for what is the action and where it is happening. So the action here is when an opportunity is marked as closed won. So when an opportunity is marked as closed won, so that is the action where it is happening on the opportunity record, right? So that's where we should be writing our code. Even though we need to create tasks, we are not writing our trigger in the task, because that's not where the action is happening, the first action. The first action is happening on the opportunity object. Creating task is just the automation that we are trying to build when this action is happening on the opportunity record, right? So we'll be creating a trigger on the opportunity record. We already know when to use before trigger and when to use after trigger, but I'll explain again when we'll be writing the code for this particular problem statement. But from the look of it, we are creating tasks, which is not the self object where we are building the automation. And based on what I told you before, if it's a separate object where we are doing the DML operation, then it should go in the after trigger. But we also see that we need to update the next steps on the opportunity. So this next step is a field on the opportunity itself. So this particular automation can go inside the before trigger. What else do we need to identify this from this problem statement is the action is when the opportunity is marked as closed won. Now it can be an existing opportunity that is updated to a closed won stage, or we can also directly create an opportunity in the closed won stage as well. So if this is an interview question, you should always ask the interviewer that, hey, can I create an opportunity directly in the closed won stage? If the interviewer says yes, that means you also need to handle the insert triggers, not only the update triggers, because from the look of it, it does look like that you are updating an existing opportunity, right? So ask all sort of these questions, and then you know like, hey, what to do and where. So let's start writing code for this following statement. And what I'm gonna do is, first I'm going to create an Apex trigger. So select this create Apex trigger option. Again, it will ask you for the trigger name. Let's call it opportunity automation, whatever you want to call it. The directory, leave it as default, and you see it has created a trigger for us, but it did not populate the object name, so we need to populate it by ourselves, because as we identified, this code needs to go inside the opportunity object. Now it also included before insert here, but what we want to do is we want to do before insert. We also want to handle after insert. We also want to handle before update and after update. Should we handle delete events and undelete events? No, because you can't update the value of this field while deleting an opportunity. This can only happen while you are creating it or updating it, right? So I'll start with our skeleton code here, which is starting a switch statement. Now inside this operation type, we want to handle all these events because we'll be handling them differently. But the tasks we need to perform inside the before triggers are same, whether it's before insert or before update. And the tasks that we need to perform inside the after trigger would be same as well, whether it's after update and after insert. So I'm going to combine all of those in my when statement, when it's before insert or before update, and we'll have another when block for after insert and after update. Cool. So what we need to do here, let's add a comment. We want to update the next steps on the opportunity. That's what we want to do. This is our to do comment. And let's also add a to do comment on the after events, where we need to do a bunch of tasks. So let's start by handling the before events, and it should be pretty straightforward. So what we want to do is we want to update the opportunity record, opportunity records next step to onboard a contract. And if I go back to my Salesforce org, if I open any opportunity here, this is the field that we are talking about. So to update it, we need to know its API name, right? So let's actually go in our object manager, open opportunity here, fields. Let's see what next step is called. Oh, it's called next step. So next step is something that we want to update. And before we do that, we need to get our current opportunity record, right? So the way we did it for our lead trigger, I'm going to have a list of opportunity, and let's call it ops. And how will I be getting it? I'm going to get it from trigger.new. Remember, this is what that gives us list of opportunity, and from this we can get our opportunity record. How we can get that? Let's copy this guy and let's get our first record from this list. And then what we want to do is op.nextStep equals to this, and that should be okay, right? Okay, so we have handled our before trigger, so I can remove this to do command now, and let's move to the after trigger. And here what we want to do is we want to create 3 different tasks. So we'll be creating tasks the way we did in our previous problem statement, and let's call it engage with customer. We need to set what ID for this task. It can be the ID of this record, right? We also need to set the subject, which can be engage with customer. Then now let's create 2 more tasks. This time what I want to do is I want to call this other one as schedule welcome call, right? And the third one that I want to call is thank you email. Cool. Let's also change it to schedule a welcome call, and the last one is send a thank you email. And that should be it. Now we need to insert all these 3 tasks. Now those of you who already know best practices in Apex, of course you know what am I doing wrong here, but those of you who are new to Salesforce and Apex, I'll explain it later that why this code is not the best code we can write, but so far this is what it is, and I think it should be okay, and it should work. So let's save it. And let's try to deploy this to our org. Cool, it worked. So it got deployed to our Salesforce org, and if we go back to our Salesforce org and if I go inside Apex Trigger here, we should be seeing our opportunity trigger as well, opportunity automation with all the code that we just created. Awesome. So now let's test it. This is the opportunity, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to closed one. Okay, that brings me back to this code. Where is our condition to only execute this for closed one stage? We missed that condition. First let's fix that before we actually test our code. So I'm going to have a condition here, op dot, I think it's called stage, if it's equals to this guy. That's when you want to execute our automation, right? So do not forget this. And the same thing in the after update as well. I'm going to wrap all of this inside that condition. Don't need this guy. Okay, so that's how our code looks like right now. Let's deploy it again. It got deployed. So let's come to our opportunity tab and let's try to create a new opportunity. Close date, anything. Account name. If you don't have any account name, let's create an account called SFDC Effects. Should be good. Let's save it. Now that's the account that our opportunity would be using. Let's try to create it directly in the close one stage so we get to see it. It did work, and we see, okay, 2 of the tasks, send a thank you email and schedule a welcome call. View more. Oh, all 3 of them are here. Let's go to details, and we see the next step is updated as well. Now I'm gonna go back and go to the opportunity record, create a new one, and let's call it SFDC facts test 2, associate with the same account, set some close date. This time we'll create it in the negotiation stage and let's save it. So nothing should be happening right now. As you see, no next steps, no activity. And then if we mark the close stage now and it's updated, we see our next step is being updated, as well as all the tasks are also showing up. So seems like the code that we have written, it works. But if you go back to our trigger code, is this the best trigger code that we can write? No. There is a lot of scope of improvement in this code, and I'll try to explain those now. So this is where we get into the best practices part of it, because when you write code in Salesforce, doesn't matter from which technological background you comes in, Salesforce has its own way of writing code. Every single line that you write here is like constrained within the scope of governor limits. And a governor limit is nothing but the set of actions that you can perform in a single transaction. So every single time this trigger would be invoked, it will be a separate transaction, and there are only certain type of executions that you can perform in this transaction. For example, you have limits on the amount of read or SOQL queries that you can write inside a execution context or inside a transaction. You are numbered with the amount of DML statements that you can execute. You are numbered with the amount of records you can get from the read operations. So if we go through our trigger code here, let's say if this trigger is being invoked on more than one record, which can happen very easily when you are doing some bulk insertion of opportunities or doing bulk updates of opportunity, then you will not have just one record, you will have many records, right? So in that case, if you look at this code line, we are only getting the first record out of the many that we are trying to update or insert. So this code will work for the very first record, but it will simply ignore the rest of those. So that's the first issue. We need to fix that. The second issue is we are inserting tasks in our after triggers here, and every single transaction in Apex is bound to only 150 DML statements. Each of these insert statements are counted as one DML statement. So with this count, we can only update or insert up to 50 opportunities, because 3 multiplied by 50 will already reach that 150 limit. Now that's considering that this is the only automation that we have running on the opportunity. In a real Salesforce org, there will be so many different automations that are happening. So you always need to limit the number of DML statements that you are doing for your particular use case, so that those other use cases do not break. So there is always a chance that your code might impact the entire business process or the use case that are being executed on a certain object. So let's fix both of those. First, I'll show you how to break this code. So we'll focus on this. And how can we break this is, let's go back to our Salesforce org. I'm going to open anonymous window here so that I can execute some code. So I'll quickly write some code here to create more than one opportunity with this code, and then we'll execute it. Okay, so what this code is doing, that we are creating 10 opportunities in the stage closed one. We are associating all of those with the account that we created earlier. We are iterating over the name so that each name is unique. It's not a requirement, but just making sure that we can recognize all of these created records. And then the close date, we are setting it to today's date. So if there's nothing wrong with this code, let's see. There is something wrong with this code on line 2, which is here. Okay, and the date should be, I think, date.today. I don't know. Yep. So we have executed our code, and now we should be seeing, I think, 10 opportunities here starting with 0 to 9, and let's see for how many of these opportunities we see the actions that we wanted. So for SFDC fact 0, we see our tasks, and we also see the next steps being populated. What about SFDC facts 1? Nothing is happening, right? Same for SFDC facts 2, and the same would be happening for rest of those, because as you see, we are only updating or doing our actions on the record number 0, the first record. We are ignoring the rest of those. So you should always bulkify your Apex Trigger code. That's the best practice that I want to teach you guys. And bulkifying the code covers a lot of different things. So first thing would be like processing all the records on which this trigger is being executed. So how can we change this code? We can like simply have a for loop here of opportunity that would just simply iterate over all the trigger.new records. Like for all the records, this particular trigger is being executed, and we move our code here, right? So that should be all good. Now we don't need the line number 6 and 7. So that's for the before trigger. Now for the after trigger, we do the same thing. So here as well, we are iterating over all the new opportunities in the Apex trigger, and then we are just simply creating tasks for those. So let's quickly deploy our code. Okay, deployed, so should be fine. Now if we go back to our developer console, this time actually let's start with 10 so we can see and go till 20. So we see the new opportunity names instead of these coming back again, and let's execute. Now if I come back here, refresh this list, we have 10 to 19. Let's open few of these records randomly, and we'll see like whether our trigger is executed for all of those. So opportunity number 10 has our automation in place, 11 as well, 13 as well, 15 as well, 17 as well, 18 and 19. What we just did, like instead of just operating on one single record, we are operating on all the records now. But the next thing is these insert statements. So if you are creating 10 records, we are already consuming 30 DML limits. Actually, let me go back and open the debug logs so I can show you what I meant. Let's open this one. Yeah, it's already open actually. And we don't have to go through entire thing. We can just scroll down and you would see the governor limits here that were being consumed by this particular transaction where we inserted 10 opportunity records. So we used 1 out of 100 SOQL queries allowed. We only returned 1 out of 50,000 records, and if you're wondering what are these, this is because of this very first line. We retrieved 1 account record. So that's what it is about. No SOSL queries, but DML statements are 31. So we are already consuming 31 out of those 150 limits that we have. So we can easily hit it if we create more than 50 records. So this time let's start with 20 and go up to 100. So we are trying to create 80 records now, which is a very common scenario. You might be dealing with thousands of records when you will work in your Salesforce org for your company. So this is not an exceptional scenario. This is a very common scenario where you need to deal with a lot of data, and you need to design your code or write your code keeping in mind that the data size can be huge and your code should not break because of this data size. So if I execute it now, let's see the result. What do we see here? Too many DML statements. If we come here, we should not be seeing any single opportunity record being inserted because the entire transaction failed because we ended up using too many DML statements. How can we see that? Let's actually see this log. Come all the way down and you would see 151 out of 150 allowed limit. So that's where it failed. Our code failed. Now how do we fix it? So similarly how we are dealing with the list of records here inside trigger.new, we are creating these records, right? These task records. So instead of inserting each of these tasks individually, what we can do is we can have a list of tasks, call it tasks, and then let's add these tasks inside the list. And in the end, what we want to do is after this for loop, not inside this for loop, because this for loop would be invoking for every single opportunity. So make sure that you are outside this for loop, and that's when you want to execute your insert statement. But instead of like inserting these tasks individually, now we will insert all the tasks at once. So we'll still be creating all these records, all these tasks for 80 or like for as many opportunities that you are inserting or updating, but we'll only end up using one single DML statement. So you see the difference. We could not even insert 50 opportunities and we are already running out of our DML statements, but this time we'll only use one for this particular task. So let's deploy it. Go back to our anonymous code, execute the same code. We are trying to insert 100 opportunities here, 80 opportunities actually, and this time it should work fine. It did. We don't see any error. If I scroll down in this log file, let's see, we are only using 2 DML statements. One is being consumed. I forgot, it's one of the system event that actually consumes it. The other one is what our insert statement is. So if I go back to the opportunity, refresh this list, you see all of these opportunities created, and all of these should have the desired result that we wanted, the automation that we wanted. So far we only tested the insert code, but on your own you can also test the update code as well. And now you also know how you can break your own code through anonymous window. Okay, now let's take a look at our next problem. This should be a quick one, but what I want to demonstrate is a very common issue that most developers easily overlook. So our problem statement says, whenever an after update trigger is executed on account record, update a field named last after update execution time on account with current time. So this sounds simple, right? So why not we start writing our code and we'll see the complexity of this problem. So I'll just quickly be creating a very basic skeleton code before we get into our logic so that I don't waste your time in writing the same code again and again. So we are creating an account trigger on account object. And since the problem statement specifically mentions after update trigger this time, so I'll just be handling after update. Now what we want here is we want to update this field called last after update execution time. And why don't we start with our best practices, since you know some of those already. So we'll use a for loop to handle all the records that are part of this trigger execution context. And here we'll just simply update this field, right? And what do we update it with? We update it with date, maybe date time dot now. Do you think our code would work? Maybe let's try to deploy it. This is something that we have seen in our previous problem statement as well. So our code got deployed. So why don't we go back to our Salesforce org? So here I've already created this field. This doesn't come by default when you spin up a new developer org, so you have to create it. So I created a datetime field, and here now if I just simply want to do anything on this trigger, let's say let's update prospect, like the type, I guess, right? Let's update it to prospect, save it. Now there's an issue and it says record is read only, because we have seen this in our previous problem statement as well. You can't update the self record in after triggers, right? Whether it's after insert, after update, or whatever it is, after delete, right? So now to work around this problem, what we can do is we can create a new list of account and then we can update that list, even though that list will also have the same record ID. But let's give it a try. Now here, instead of updating this account directly, what we can do is we can create a new account. Let's call it new account, and we'll create it with the same ID as of this account. So it would be like acc.id, but it's a new instance. It's not that trigger already knows about. And here, instead of updating this account, we'll update this new account. And then as we know, we should not do any DML operation right here. So instead of doing something like new account here, what we should do is we should add it to our list. And after this for loop ends, and even after this switch statement, we can do a quick check whether this list is empty or not. And this is where we update this list. So now see, we are not updating the instance the trigger already knows about. We are not directly updating it. And we are creating a new instance of those accounts, and then we are adding those accounts to a list and then updating that list. So let's give this one a try. This got deployed fine. And now let's save this. So our previous problem is fixed and we don't see the error that the record is in read-only mode, but we see a different error this time. And this error says account trigger maximum trigger depth exceeded, which means our trigger is like executing again and again and again. And to show this to you, let me give it another try so that we get some logs. And if I open these logs into analysis mode, you will see what I'm talking about. So here if you see, our account update trigger is executing infinitely, and that's not what we want. So how do we solve this problem? This is what we call a recursive trigger problem. Although the example that I have is not the best example and you might never see these kind of scenarios, but this problem is so common, and it's because of the different automation processes that you have on your SObject. So let's say your trigger is updating something, based on that your workflow is updating something else on your same SObject, and because of that your triggers are firing again and they are executing again, firing something else, and this problem continues. So your trigger is like getting fired again and again and again, and we don't want that. How do we solve this problem? So there are many ways to solve this problem, but keeping in mind that this is a crash course, I'm going to go with an easy one or the most used one, and that's by using a static variable. So a static variable is something that keeps its value throughout the execution context. It's not like your class variables, which kind of loses its value when this class is executing again, or in this case this trigger is executing again. So each time this trigger would be executing, we'll work with this empty accounts to update list. But if you would have a static variable, we would always be able to read the latest value that's there in the static variable. And now because this is a trigger, you can't create a static variable here. I think so, but please do verify that statement. Generally you create static variables in a class. So this takes us to our next best practice, which has nothing to do with Salesforce governor limits or any sort of Salesforce limits. This is more about writing more readable and maintainable code. And our best practice says that you should never write your logic inside a trigger. So we already discussed that we should only have one trigger per SObject, but this one says that even that trigger should not have any logic in it. Your trigger should always delegate the logic task to some handler class or some helper classes, and that's what we'll be doing. So let's create a new class here and let's call it account trigger handler. And in this trigger, in this class, first let's actually create a method, and let's call it after update handler. And what this method will do is like it's going to accept a list of account, and then we can copy our trigger code, all of it, to here. Instead of trigger.new, now we can use the accounts variable. We can also move this thing out and move it here, and of course this part where we are updating our accounts. Let's actually make it a simple method and not a static method. And now our trigger looks very plain, right? So we can actually call this method from trigger. So first we'll create the instance of the class, and then we'll just simply call this method. And of course we need to pass our trigger.new. Let's deploy this class first. Then our trigger. Everything got deployed, and now if I try to save my record again, we should still have the same issue. We didn't fix the issue yet, so we still have it like the trigger maximum depth reached. So how can we fix it? To fix it, what we can do is we can use a static boolean variable, and let's call it like is after update already executed. And we'll keep it as false by default. Like when the trigger is executing for the first time, the value of this variable would be false. But as soon as our after update trigger has been executed, we'll set it to true. And the next time our after update trigger would be handling, it will read it as like true and it won't execute the logic. You will know what I'm talking about by following this code. So we have a variable has after update trigger already executed, and based on this, okay, we are in trigger, we should not be here actually. We should be in our handler class. And now here what we can do is when we are executing this method, so either we can use this variable right here inside this method and we can get this logic with this boolean variable, or we can do it inside the trigger as well, depending on your use case. Here I'm going to demonstrate to use it inside the trigger itself. So if our account trigger handler dot has after update already executed, and if this thing is false, so let's use a not here, then we want to execute our after update trigger handler. And once this execution is done, what we want to do is we want to set it to true. So the next time this trigger will execute, it will read this value as true, and since we are using a not here, we should never even be executing this class again. So let's deploy this class first. Sorry, we should never be executing this method again. What it is? Invalid type boolean. Oh, there is a small spelling mistake. Now if we'll save it, I think it should go through. It did not. Why it did not? Oh, it did not solve the problem because good that I did it here and we get to learn a bit more. So we are setting it to true here, but if you see our logic, even before we exit this method and reach this line number 6, we are already starting another update. So that means even before we set it to true, we are like already in that recursive problem. So what we can do is like we can take this thing out from here and set it to true here. Like as soon as we start this after update processing for the first time, either we can do it from here, that should solve the issue, or we can do it right from here. So both way it should work. Let's do it from the trigger itself actually. And before I show you like this should work, let's see that our after update, like let me cancel this thing. It's blank. Let me refresh this page so we don't have any value here. So our trigger should at least execute once so that we get this value updated here, right? And then it should also go through. So let me update something else and click save. And you see it did update our execution time. And if you go to our developer console, let's open latest log here. And let's open it in analysis mode. And you see we have like executed after update only twice, and the second time it like kind of exited right from here. It did not even executed our logic. So this is what we call it recursive trigger problem, and this problem is very common and it happens because of a lot of different processes or automations running on your SObject, and some developers like tend to overlook it. But if you work for a big companies or with a large Salesforce org, generally these things are done inside a trigger framework, which kind of comes with some helpful ways to avoid these recursive issues, either by default or just by setting a check like this. But I've already shown you, and now you should be handling this even when you are writing your code in an interview setting. So now let's move to our last problem, which should be the most complex of all. Okay, so our last problem for this crash course is more of a real world scenario, and you would see these kind of problems like every now and then. So let's treat this problem as in that you are sitting in an interview setting, and this is a problem given to you by an interviewer. And these kind of problems you'll get mostly in these product companies like Google, Amazon, and all of these. And they would give you this kind of problem and give you like 30-40 minutes to write, a proper code, a fully functional code for it. So generally, like, you take your time in reading the problem, ask some clarification questions if you have to. And if you want to know more about these interview processes, I already have like a Google developer interview video, which you should check out. And I'm going to add the link in the description and maybe somewhere here on the top. So let's read it from an interviewer's perspective. Our company's Salesforce system manages customer support cases. Each case can have multiple related child cases. The company wants to implement a feature that automatically calculates and updates the total resolution days for a parent case based on the resolution days of their related child cases. Additionally, we want to ensure that any changes made to child cases are accurately reflected in the parent case resolution time. Now we also have an example here. The parent case P001 has 3 child cases. Child case 1 with resolution days 5, 2 with resolution days 3, and child case 3 with resolution days 2. If a 4th child case is added with the resolution days 4, the parent case total resolution days should update to 14. So that makes sense. 5, 3, 8 to 10 for 14. But do you understand this problem statement entirely with this statement and the example? I do not, and I have few questions that I should be asking my interviewer to clarify the doubts that I have in my mind. And my first question would be, since this is a self relationship, like a case is linked to a parent case, right? I want to know how many level deep we are talking about. It can go as many level deep as we want, right? So we want to make sure that in this particular solution, how many levels are we talking about? So that would be my very first question. How many level deep this hierarchy can go? So for the sake of this problem statement and this interview, let's say that your interviewer says 1 level deep. So we'll take that. The second question would be, can resolution days be updated manually? Now I'm asking all these questions because they will impact the solution that I'll be writing. So I just don't want to, hey, I understood the problem, let's start writing the code. I just don't want to do that. I want to clear out all my questions before I start writing the code, so that I would write the most accurate code and I don't write anything that's unnecessary or just complicate the problem when it's not even needed. So can resolution days be updated manually? Because if you are updating it manually, that means someone can update it to anything. Like if it should be 14, what if someone goes and updates it to 20? Do you want to handle that scenario or not? So let's say the interviewer says no, it's a read-only field. That makes the job easy for us. When does the resolution days field update? Because it's a read-only field, we want to know when it's updating, right? So let's say the interviewer says it's updated whenever a case is moved to resolved status, which is good. We understood it now. Then can a case be created in resolved status directly? This would be my next question. Because we talked about the case status is updated to resolved, but what if it's like already created in the resolved status? And that would impact my solution because we'll be handling one more scenario in our trigger, right? And let's say the interviewer says yes. So these are my 4 clarifying questions that I would be asking, and you should be asking your interviewer as well. So let's start tackling this problem one by one. So we already know the trigger would no doubt go on case object because we are only talking about one object here. So basically we'll be having our logic whenever a child case is updated, and we'll be updating the parent case. And now since we already know the answer that a case can already be created in resolved status, that means we are handling the insert event. Update, of course, we are handling. Delete we are handling, because if a case record is deleted, a child case record is deleted, that impacts the parent case calculation, right? So delete we are handling, and whenever a record is undeleted, we want to handle that too, because then again we need to update this total resolution days field. So we know our object, we know our trigger events. So let's start writing the code. So I'll quickly write some basic skeleton code and then we'll start building our logic. Okay, before I write my skeleton code, we didn't talk about whether we should be doing it in before or after. So we know that we are handling insert, update, delete and undelete, but are we handling before insert or after insert? So if you see, we'll have our logic on the child case because that's where the first triggering action is happening, and we are updating the parent case. Now the parent case is not part of this trigger execution context. The trigger does not know about the parent case yet, right? So in that case, even though it's the same SObject, we are going to write our trigger, we are going to handle the after events, because the record that we want to update is not part of the trigger execution context, and we have talked about it. So that's our basic case trigger. Now let's also create an Apex class and call it case trigger handler, since now we know that this is where our logic should go. Okay, perfect. We have 4 methods corresponding to every single trigger event that we are handling in our case trigger. So we'll start with our after insert event first, and because we'll be writing our logic, I'm not going to touch our trigger at the moment, because now we know that our logic should be out of the trigger, right? So let's start with our after insert handler, and here we should of course be having a list of case, let's call it cases, right? And then we should of course be iterating upon this list. You know the drill. Now you are already experienced. So here we should be checking if the resolution days is not equals to null, because if a trigger or if a record is just created and if this field is null, which means the record might not have been moved to the resolved status. That's why we have it as null, right? But if it's not null, then we want to, let's add a to-do comment here, get parent and update this guy, total resolution days. Let's keep it as is for now and let's move to the after update. Now in the after update, of course, we'll have this list of cases again and we'll have this same logic, right? Now here, instead of just checking whether the resolution days is not equals to null, we should also check whether the value inside this field is updating. So think about it. If a case is already closed, this field might have already been updated. Let's say the value in this field was 10. Now someone comes and they update this case record with something else, not the status, something else, like for example the next steps or anything, right? They are not closing the case again, so the value in this field is not changing. And if it's not changing, do we want to calculate something or like recalculate the resolution days on our parent? It's unnecessary, right? So that's why we should always check whether the value in this field is updating or not. So let's have another condition. Let me copy it as is. Should be not equals to the previous value. How do we get the previous value? Let's say we have a map, because you know we have trigger.old map, right? So let's use that. We'll get this value from our trigger. So we have a map and let's call it old cases map. So from this one we can get our the old version of our record. Let's call it old case version. Yeah. So we got our old case as well, and let's just simply match whether the resolution days in the new one is updated from the last one. If that's the case, if both of these conditions satisfies, then only we want to update the calculation. Now this kind of becomes redundant here because we are already checking whether the value is being updated, so we don't even need it. But it doesn't even harm if we keep it as well, but I'm just gonna remove it. So if the resolution days are changing, we want to of course update the total resolution days on our parent record, because this definitely impacts our calculation. But we have another case as well. Now this is where you should be paying attention. What if a case is reparented? So let's say, as per our example, this C001 is has its parent as P001, right? What if we reparent it to P002? Then this number of days, that's 5 number of days, should be deducted from P001, right? And these should be added to P002, right? So we should also take care of that scenario as well. It's called reparenting and it's of course possible. So what we can do is if case dot, now here we don't know the parent field, like how do we link these two cases. So what I'm gonna do is let's call it parent underscore case double underscore c. Let's call it this, and of course you can discuss this with your interviewer that hey, do you have the field name for the parent case? If not, I'm gonna assume this as is, right? And they'll let you know. If this one is not equals to the old case version's parent case. Now here in this case, of course you want to update the parent and do the recalculation, but on both the new one and the previous one. So our to do command should be like get parent of both versions and update total resolution days. Now let's move to after delete. Now here what you want to do is if the child case is deleted, we just want to recalculate the parent. So would be very similar to this one. Let me copy this, paste here, and I think for the undelete case as well it will be very similar. So let me paste it here as well. Okay, so that's a basic skeleton. Now we need to get these parents and update the value. So what I'm gonna do is, on this class top I can have a list of case, right? Because the parent is also case record, and let's call it parent cases to update. And let's not give any value to it for now. And because these are static methods, we need to make sure that this variable is static as well. And what we can do is, now we can build this list. And to build this list, let's start with the after insert first. Make sure that this is not null. So I'm going to create a new list. Now you might be asking that, hey, why we can't just do it up here? The reason is because if this will be a static field, it will keep the value, and if like more events are being executed, it will keep the last value, and we don't want to keep updating the same record. So it's always a good idea to start from scratch. If you want to work with a list and you don't want to keep the old values, then start from scratch, and this is a way to start from scratch. Other way would be to get rid of all the static and just go plain, like without static. Let's actually have a set of ID. We don't need the entire case record. We can just do with the ID. So parent case IDs to update. Yeah. Now here we can just simply get this value, as we already assumed the field is parent case. So we can have parent case IDs to update dot add current case record and its parent, like the parent of the current case record. So now we know the parent case IDs that we need to update. The next thing would be, let me take this to do comment out of here. Calculate the child cases resolution days. This is what you want to do next, because we know the parent cases that we need to update, but these parent cases still doesn't know of all the child records that they have and their resolution days. So how can we do that? We can do it by querying these parent cases along with their child cases, and then iterate over the child cases, sum up all the resolution days, and then update the parent one. The other solution would be is using the aggregate query as well on the child record, on the case object, but we are group it with the parent ID, right? And that's the other solution. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let's go back to Apex developer guide. There should be something called aggregate functions. And what they allow you to do is, they allow you to run these functions like sum, max, count, minimum, and all that. What we want is sum of resolution days, and then we can use it with a group by clause, something like this, like what we are doing here. So here we get an average amount on opportunity, and we group it by campaign ID. So we like group our results by the parent ID. So we'll have like parent case P001, then total resolution days, because we'll be using sum, let's say 14. So P001 14, and then we can just simply update P001 with that, and similar to that P002 with the calculated days and all that. So that's going with the aggregate queries. So let's actually first copy this, paste it here, let's save our code. And what we want is sum of this resolution days field. Let's call it total days. This is an alias in SOQL, and of course it's running on case. And we also want the parent case ID, so let's do that. And as we have seen here, we are going to group it by the parent case ID, right? So let's use group by parent case. Now this should give us the results that we want: cases with resolution days. And then we can like simply iterate over this result set. Let's copy this for loop. Of course, when you will be iterating over it, so here you will notice that I'm not getting a case list here, rather I'm getting an aggregate result list. So something to keep in mind. And let's iterate over these. And what we want is, we want to build a list of parent cases to update. Now let's remove this to do comment and let's do this. So we need to create a list, of course. Let's also move everything inside an if block here, because we only want to do all of this when we have some parent IDs to update, right? It's always a best practice to avoid executing unnecessary code, and if blocks are the way to go. So now here we can just initialize this list. Now we can just simply keep adding item to this list. So this is where we'll create our parent case. Not create, I mean we can use the existing ID, which would be of course this guy, parent case ID, right? And how do we do that? If you see this example, we use the get method. So ar.get and the field name. And of course we want to update the total resolution days, so let's not forget that. And the value of this would be ar.get, and this is where you can use your alias, which is this. Now this won't work as is, because this get method actually gives you an object, so you need to typecast it. So let's do that. First let's have the parent ID, and we'll be typecasting this ar.get parent case. So we are just simply typecasting an object to the ID, and then we can use that here. And then we can have a decimal field, and let's call it total days maybe, yeah. And the value of this would be this method's result, and we need to typecast it to a decimal. And in the end, what we can do is, if of course this list is not blank, then update. Now this exact same code we have to write for after delete and after undelete as well, right? And maybe would be the exact same code for the after update as well, because once you build this list, which is what we'll be doing here, you see our to do comment, it's same, right? So once you build this list, we are going to do exact same thing. So why not we move it to a method and just call that method from everywhere, right? And it's not a good idea to have these helper method inside the handler class. Again, it's up to you, but what I generally do is like move these helper methods to a helper class. You can call it a service class, helper class, or whatever you want to name it. But we are going to create a new class, and we are going to call it case trigger helper. And what this method will be doing, let's create a new method. You don't have to go with static methods all the time. It's just something that I'm doing for the convenience. But you should only go for static when you need to. So let's say that, don't follow. So in today's crash course, don't follow me doing this. And let's call this as update total resolution days on parent cases. Very, very self-explanatory. So if anyone is going to read this code, they will know what this method is doing. Let's take everything out from here and move everything here. What we want is, I think, a set of ID, right? That's what we had, right? This one. Yep. So if this set of ID is not blank, then we retrieve the parent cases and update those with this aggregate query. And then we can just simply call this method from here. Now let's quickly fill out our after delete and after undelete triggers as well. Both are exactly same actually, and then in the end we should be calling the same method. I'll tell you what would be the difference here. Okay, the difference would be like for after delete handler, how we'll be passing this cases list, because there won't be trigger.new that will be passing for after insert. Like if we call this case trigger handler dot after insert handler, it needs a list of cases, right? So here you will pass trigger.new because during the insert there is nothing called old and you need the new list. But if you do the same thing for after delete, you don't have new here because the new version of that record is already deleted. We only have old. So you pass old here. That would be the difference. And for undelete, it's actually exactly like an insert. So now last thing is handling our after update handler. So here again we'll use something like, we already have our condition. All we have to do is insert the parent case. Same here too, but here we also need to add the all case versions parent case, and then eventually we call, not from the for loop, from outside for loop. Don't forget these best practices. Never do the DML operation inside a for loop, because when you call this method, which is very self-explanatory, this does a DML statement. So if you call it from inside the for loop, you are in trouble. You will hit those governor limits. Now you see how clean our code looks. Let's make sure that we complete this part. So our trigger is very self-explanatory, handling all 4 events. Our trigger handler class is also very readable, where you get your cases, you build a list of parent IDs to update, and then you call a method to update those total resolution days. And that's exactly what we do in the next methods as well. And this helper class does the main job for us, where it like takes these parent cases IDs to update, get all the child cases and just sum up their resolution days, and then we update those parent cases with the help of this for loop. This is where we build our parent cases and this is where we update it. So of course these fields do not exist on the case object just yet, so I'm gonna quickly create these and then we'll try to deploy our code. Okay, so now we have both our resolution days and total resolution days field, both are number field, and we should have a parent case field as well. I just made sure that we are using the same API names that we have been using inside our code. So let's start deploying our code one by one. So first we need to deploy trigger helper. If you don't want to deploy them one by one, then what you can do is like just click on this class and deploy all. But let me deploy them one by one for now. Okay, parent cases to update variable does not exist. Okay, so that's our first problem. So our parent cases to update, we did not move it to trigger helper, right? We should be moving it to trigger helper. And of course this should be static as well. Can't just be accessed as a normal variable inside the static method. So this one is deployed. Now let's deploy the trigger handler. Something here, this parent cases to update does not exist. Why do we need this though? Oh yeah, here. This again we should move to helper because we need to make sure that this thing is always blank when we are working with it. Let me deploy the helper class, handler class, and then the trigger itself. Awesome. So our code is deployed and this should work as well. We can quickly give it a test. Let's create a new case. Let's call it P001. Oh, we have some error. Update total resolution days line 8. And this is not good. This is a null pointer. Okay, this is where we are getting the null pointer. Oh, I thought we were initializing it here. Did we move that code? I think we moved that code. Let's do this everywhere. We don't need the null set here. Okay, this is our P001 parent case. What we want, let's create child cases now. Let's call this one C001. Let's create one more. C002, and this time let's say we have the resolution days as 4. I'm also going to link it with my parent case with P001. So what I'm expecting with this is my parent case should have the total resolution days as 4. Let's save this. A DML exception, missing argument. What is this? Okay, so this is where it's complaining, line 30, that we don't have ID in this list, but we do. What's going on? This list we are building by iterating over this aggregate query result set. Oh, we do not have our where condition here. I would fail this interview, of course. This is a major thing that I missed, and you should of course never miss it. Now nope, doing it wrong again. It should be in. So we want to make sure that we are considering all parent cases here. It should work now. Yeah, it did work. So our child case C002 is created with resolution days 4. Let's go to parent case, which is P001, and check out the total resolution days there. Yeah, so it got updated with 4. Now let's also check the update scenario. So in that case, we already have our child case 001, right? Actually create one more. Let's create few more. Clone. It should have all of those values, but I'm just going to change the resolution days to 10. That should update our parent case with 14, right? Then let's also add one more, and this time let's update it to 15. Save. Now we have this one correctly updated. What I'm going to do now is, I think our C001 case was not linked to this. So first I'm going to add the parent case here as P001 and save this. Okay, so we are getting another exception, and this is again very easily missed if you are writing your code in an interview setting. So that's why I did not deliberately handle it. But what it is actually, when you are writing your code in the handler, in the update handler, so here inside this if block where we are checking whether the case is reparented, we are not checking whether any of these is null. If it's null, then we don't want to add those, right? So how do we tackle this? So we can have more if blocks here. If this is not null, and of course add this condition here as well, and this should fix this issue. Nice. So now, since I did not add any resolution days, I should still have 29 here in my parent case. Yep. And now let's add the resolution days as well. Not the total resolution days. This, and this should update it to, I think, 52. Yep. And now also test the reparenting scenario where I just move this case from P001 to maybe C002. It's 1032 case number. Let's go to cases. First, let's check our parent case P001. It should be 23 again because we moved one of the case out. Oh, no, sorry, it's this one. So it should be now 29. Yep. And this C002 should also have total resolution days as 23 because of this. So that's working. Now let's delete this C001. It's deleted. Nothing is changing on P001 because it was not even linked to it. But you will notice one more bug if I refresh this page. This should have been blanked out to 0, but it did not. So you need to identify why it's happening. It's an edge case that you have missed and you need to fix it. Now let's do the undelete scenario. Again, the undelete won't change anything, at least from this testing, because this never updated. But I'll show you that the trigger works. So now let's discuss the limitation with our current solution. Apart from the bug that I just mentioned, which you need to fix, the limitation is whenever we are using these aggregate queries, we can only get up to 2000 results. So if there would be a case where, you know, these parent case IDs has more than 2000 child cases collectively, this query won't give us the entire result set and we might not update all the parent cases, which is what we don't want, right? So that's the limitation with our present solution. Now let's move to the, now if you are sure that the result set of this query will be under 2000, now this is like depending on your company's use case, then you can go ahead with this solution, and this actually is a good solution. I would implement it wherever the result size is like, you know, kind of small. Now let's quickly check the logs of our current solution, and here let's move to analysis so that we can compare it to the next one that we are building. We can see like the trigger is firing twice, duration of our solution, like the total solution ran in 149 millisecond, and the heap it used is 1567. Now under the executed units, if you go for queries, if it would have shown me the queries in a simpler way. Yeah, there you go. There's just one query. Actually, let's go back to the log only mode and just check the governor limits. So one SOQL query, one DML statement, 3 query rows. That's how our current solution looks like. Now the next solution would be is like, querying the parent cases along with the child cases, then use the for loop to count the number of days and then update. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new method actually to simplify things using inner query. Let's call it that. We'll still have our parent case IDs. We'll still see whether it's we'll still check the size, but instead of aggregate query this time, we'll change our query. We'll use list of case. Let's call it all cases. What's the field name? We're gonna get the ID and total resolution days from parent, and then we'll also get all the child and their where's our field, resolution days, this one from case, and of course don't forget our parent case IDs. This is what I forgot last time and I already failed the interview. So when we get this, now we can just simply iterate over these, right? And here we can have a decimal variable, total days. Let's start with 0. Then we want to go inside the inner for loop, and here again we want to iterate over the cases, but this time child case. Let's call it parent cases, parent case, and the child case will get from the parent case, of course, right? Parent case. We also need to update this, I think, cases, because this is an inner query. And here what we can do is we'll just keep on updating this total days value with child case dot resolution days. Now at the end of this for loop, this is where we'll be building our parent cases to update. The ID would be, of course, the parent case dot ID, and the total resolution days will be the total days like this. Let me get rid of this one now, we don't need it. And then I think this should be good, and it should be in operator so that we consider all parent case IDs. So now let's call this one from maybe like everywhere, right? Okay, so we have our parent case with total resolution days as 40. Let's update this child case as 31 and see whether the parent case is updated with 50 or not. Hopefully it should work, but it did not. it became 0. Let's check. So we get our parent case IDs. We are querying everything along with child cases. We start with 0 as our counter. Then we keep adding resolution days. And then we update total days. This looks good actually. Maybe this thing is not returning me anything, so by default we are just like not even going in this for loop. Let me check case object. Oh, I know, because we are querying cases, it should be cases _r, because this is a custom field we created. And with this we also need to update our inner for loop. And I think it allowed us to deploy the code before, because the case object already has a lookup with another case. Oh, we didn't even had to create, oh shit, that's why. So we already had another lookup relationship, but we created our custom one. But that's fine. Now I think our code should work because it was our query. But like from the interview perspective, that code should be fine. I don't think you should have any issues with that. It's just the minor mistake that we made. So now let's update it back to 21 and hopefully it works this time. Okay, so it did work. So the code from an interview setting was fine. It's just the relationship name that we used incorrectly, because there's like one already existed, but that's fine. Now what we should do is, let's go to developer console and open the new logs and compare the, like, let's do the analysis. So in the previous one, the duration was 149 millisecond, like when you were using the aggregate query, and the heap was 1567. This time the duration and the heap both are slightly a bit more. So that is why I said like the first solution is a better solution if you for sure know that your result set is less than 2000. But if it's more, then you have to go with the second solution. Now you can actually improve your second solution a bit more. From the heap perspective is like, how can you do that? You can just simply move away from this SOQL here to SOQL for loops. That means you just write this SOQL query directly in the for loop, and this one should give you better result, because what it will do is it uses the SOAP API's query more method. So each time this loop will execute, it will just have 200 records to work with. So even though this total, let's say this query returns you 10,000 records, this for loop will be executed in multiple chunks, each time just processing 200 records. So, and then the heap will be clean, right? You will process 200 records, the heap is cleaned, you get new 200 records, you process those, then the heap is clean again. So this one is a bit better solution than what we have written, and it should give you the same result. So with this, I think we should wrap up this crash course as well. I hope you learned something from this video. I tried to cover every possible situation that a normal Salesforce developer faces on a daily basis. And if you like this video, of course give it a thumbs up. Please do share it with your connections, your friends, whoever is working in Salesforce industry and wants to learn Salesforce in the quickest possible way. And I'll see you guys in the next video.